Story 1. The unexpected pregnancy and the past that followed. I never planned on raising a child alone, yet that was exactly the path I set for myself the moment I decided to leave California and return home, pregnant with my ex-boyfriend's baby. His name is Jeff. I met him years ago, and we dated for 4 years. He meant the world to me. We talked about our future, sometimes jokingly but often seriously. Marriage after I finished school, maybe children one day. I believed we were building a life together. Yet when it came down to committing to those dreams, marriage, a family, Jeff pulled away. He told me he never wanted children and wasn't ready for marriage. Despite the love and stability I thought we had, he ended the relationship abruptly, claiming my desires for a lifelong partnership and kids were too much for him. The split shattered my heart, but I decided to accept it. If marriage and children were off the table, then we simply weren't compatible. I never wanted to force anyone into becoming a parent. We broke up, and for a short time, just about a month, we found ourselves back in each other's arms physically, though not officially reconciling. It was a confusing time. I was still in love and secretly hoping he might have a change of heart, but he never said the words I longed to hear. Instead, he moved on. He got back together with his old girlfriend, Grace, which stung deeply. I realized I needed to let go. I had a job opportunity back in my home state, thousands of miles away. I arranged the move, and I didn't tell Jeff about it. I left California quietly. A few weeks after settling into my new home, I discovered I was pregnant. The child I carried was Jeff's, conceived during that confusing interlude after the breakup. The realization struck me like lightning. I had always wanted children. Could I raise this baby alone? The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that I could. I had a stable job and had managed to set aside some savings. The cost of living was more manageable in my home state. My family and friends were there. I told myself, I can do this. I will love this child fully and independently, sparing Jeff from any obligation he never wanted. I arranged my prenatal care, planning out every detail. Financially, I calculated the costs of childcare and even considered starting a college fund early. Emotionally, I braced myself. While I had come to terms with the breakup, it still hurt that Jeff had not wanted the life I desired, a life we once hinted we'd share. At first, I saw no reason to inform Jeff. He had made it clear that he didn't want to hear from me unless I was literally dying. A childish remark, but it stuck in my mind. Why would I contact him to say I'm pregnant, when he'd been so clear about what he didn't want? Months passed. I was about 5 months along when I returned to California briefly for a weekend visit. My plan was simple. Keep a low profile, see some old friends, then head back. I never expected to run into Tanya, one of Jeff's cousins and a notorious gossip. Tanya recognized me immediately, and seeing my stomach, knew I was pregnant. She asked how I could have moved on so quickly, implying that I was with someone else. I lied. I said I had a new boyfriend and was 5 months pregnant with his child. Tanya accepted this with awkward congratulations, and I prayed that would be the end of it. But Tanya being Tanya, within hours she had spread the word that I was back in town and pregnant. It didn't take long for my phone to light up with messages from old friends. They told me Jeff was desperately trying to reach me, to find out if the baby was his. He had no direct line to me, new number, new social media, and my friends were loyal enough not to give him my contact information. But now Jeff knew I was pregnant. The truth loomed large. I wanted to return home and ignore him, but doubts gnawed at me. What was the right thing to do? I deliberated. Some friends advised me to tell him the truth. Others supported my plan to deny his paternity or claim I'd conceived too recently for it to be his. Ultimately, I decided it would be best to meet him. This was a serious, life-altering situation. He deserved to know. Jeff got in touch through a friend I was staying with in California. He insisted on talking in person. It was almost 10 o'clock at night when we agreed to meet at his parents' house. His parents had always treated me kindly, so I felt safe there. On the drive over, my heart hammered with anxiety. I was terrified he would tell me off or reject the baby. Maybe he'd say he never wanted anything to do with us. I was steeling myself for that conversation. When I arrived, Jeff's mother answered the door and hugged me. She seemed relieved to see me, though she was nervous. In the living room, I found Jeff sitting on the couch holding Grace's hand. Confetti and cups scattered the room, evidence of a party that had just ended. Apparently, a big event had taken place, something I would soon regret learning about. Jeff wasted no time. He told me I wouldn't fool him by claiming I had a new man. He knew me too well. He demanded to know why I hadn't told him sooner. I explained. He had told me not to contact him unless I was dying. He winced, saying he never imagined a scenario like this. He said that was supposed to be about respecting Grace's feelings, not cutting me off if I were pregnant. Grace then accused me of ruining her proposal. My heart sank. Ruining her proposal? Confused, I learned that earlier that evening, Jeff had proposed to Grace in front of their friends and family. During the celebration, Tanya had made a scene about my pregnancy, implying Jeff dodged a bullet by ending things with me. Instead of a joyful proposal night, drama ensued. I tried to keep a brave face, but inside, I was shattered. Jeff had proposed, to another woman, something he claimed to fear with me. I offered Jeff reassurance, telling him he could go on with his life. I didn't need anything from him. I'd planned it all, taken care of every detail. I wanted him to understand I never intended to trap him or ruin his life. Jeff's response stunned me. He grew teary-eyed, saying he couldn't just abandon his child. He had deep abandonment issues from his own father who left when he was 6. I looked at him. This man I'd loved for 4 years. This man who had once told me he would never make a good dad. Now, he claimed he wanted to figure something out, to be in the child's life. Frustration stirred in me. I lived thousands of miles away now, had set everything up at home. I wasn't going to uproot my life again. I made that clear. The logistics sounded impossible. Jeff grew quiet, and then he asked the baby's gender. I slipped up, admitting it was a boy. Grace let out a wail and fled to the kitchen, sobbing. His mother cried softly too. The whole scene was chaotic and full of tears and heartbreak, far from the simple, direct conversation I'd hoped for. Standing there, seeing balloons and confetti from what should have been Grace's special night, I felt overwhelmed, humiliated, and deeply sad. Jeff's life had moved on without me. He was ready to marry Grace. Now the news of my pregnancy had derailed everything. I left, hurrying out with my friend and staying in a hotel. The next day I booked an earlier flight home. Back in my own space, I focused on the baby's nursery, trying to push the painful memories aside. I knew Jeff would find a way to contact me again. I told my friends I'd spoken to him, apologized if I put them in a tough spot, and told them they could block him if he persisted. I cared about Jeff, but I was done chasing him. If he truly wanted a relationship with his child, he would have to show genuine effort. Time passed. A week after I returned home, Jeff somehow obtained my new phone number. Furious that someone betrayed my trust, I demanded to know who gave it to him before we'd talk. Eventually, he told me, and we spoke on FaceTime. On the call, Jeff made it clear he wanted to be in our son's life. He had no threats, no lawyers, no shouting parents in the background. Just a man who seemed remorseful and determined to do right by his child. He regretted how I found out about his engagement to Grace and said they were no longer together. I suspected the breakup was messy, not the clean mutual decision he pretended it was. But I let it go. None of that mattered more than figuring out the future for our son. He admitted he hated that I never told him sooner. I reminded him of the hurtful instruction he gave. Do not contact me unless you're dying. He apologized. I apologized too for not telling him I was pregnant. We realized grudges were pointless now. We were about to become co-parents. He said he wanted to send baby gifts. I hesitated to give him my address. This felt too sudden and personal. I needed time to adjust. He called every night after that, sometimes just to say goodnight to the baby. It was surreal watching this man, who once said he never wanted kids, lean so enthusiastically into fatherhood. He asked to visit me. At first, I said no. It was all happening too fast. He asked if he could come the following weekend. I had a baby shower planned on Saturday. He wanted to attend. I doubted if it was a good idea. My parents disliked him now, remembering how badly he hurt me. My siblings said they'd beat him up if he upset me again. though that was mostly bluster. My sister was more reasonable. She said maybe letting him come would build goodwill and trust. Eventually I said yes, with conditions. No touching me unless I said it was okay. No causing drama during the shower, and he had to stay in a hotel. He agreed. He asked if his mother, brother, and sister could come. He said they all wanted to support him. I said yes. His sister even messaged me privately to ensure I was truly comfortable. I appreciated that. My parents decided to invite them for dinner the night before the shower. Jeff and his family arrived, and it was awkward but polite. Jeff greeted my belly first, saying hello to the baby. To my surprise, the baby kicked. I let Jeff feel it. His mother nearly cried, claiming the baby knew his daddy's voice, though in truth, he'd been active all day. On the day of the baby shower, things went well. It was co-ed, festive, with games for men and women. Jeff participated without overstepping. He respected my boundaries and asked before touching my stomach for photos. We took family pictures with both families present. I found myself relaxing, enjoying his presence. After all was done, I invited them to my house to see the nursery. Jeff's mom cried at the sight of it. So did I. Hormones and relief, I guess. Jeff and his brother even offered to repaint the nursery a better shade of blue. My dad teased that Jeff should be pitching in anyway, but I reminded everyone Jeff only just learned about the baby. Still, Jeff and his brother helped paint, and Jeff's sister and I talked privately outside. I tried asking her about Grace's departure, but she suggested that was a conversation for Jeff and me. She did confirm Tanya was banned from their family events. Serves Tanya right for stirring the pot. When the painting was done, everyone but Jeff and my sister left. We needed a private talk. My sister stayed in the living room for emotional backup in case it got too rough. In my bedroom, Jeff and I sat down. Or rather, I lay down on the bed because my feet hurt, and he sat at the opposite end. We didn't know where to start. Finally, I asked him directly, why the sudden change of heart about fatherhood? He said he was scared before, convinced he'd be a bad father. He broke up with me to spare me that disappointment. He admitted that fear guided every decision he made. He'd lumped marriage into his excuse to ensure I would walk away completely, thinking I'd never settle for someone who didn't want marriage or kids. When he proposed to Grace, he did it out of panic, trying not to lose another partner over fears. Grace wanted marriage, though not children. Ironically, she pressured him into that grand proposal party. After learning about my pregnancy, she gave him an ultimatum. Choose her or the baby. He asked for the ring back, and she threw it at him along with other items. They were done. Jeff swore he wished he could rewind time, never break my heart, never push me away. He asked if we could ever get back together. I refused. Gently but firmly, I told him we couldn't keep jumping in and out of each other's lives based on fear. I encouraged him to seek therapy to work through these issues. I needed him stable and secure for our son's sake. Whether we became a couple again was secondary to building a healthy co-parenting relationship. He agreed to therapy, promising to do it for himself and the baby, not just to win me back. We ended up lying side by side, talking quietly. It felt intimate, but not romantic. After a while, I got sleepy, and he left. The next morning, due to flight delays, they stayed another day. Jeff and his brother painted the second coat in the nursery. I made them lunch. Before leaving, Jeff told me he was thinking about moving to my state temporarily for the baby's birth. His job offered remote options. He admitted he might never want to leave once he saw his son. I nodded, uncertain but open-minded. I wanted our son to know his father if Jeff proved consistent. By the time they left, we were in a better place emotionally. Jeff said goodbye to me at work, making a sweet gesture to the baby, and my co-workers fawned over him. They said I should give him another chance. But I just smiled, non-committal. My heart needed time to heal, and I wanted a partner who chose me wholeheartedly, not out of guilt or obligation. In the weeks that followed, we talked on the phone regularly. We discussed baby names. He had some terrible suggestions, but that amused me. I decided that fighting over baby's surname or name choices wasn't worth the stress. There would be bigger battles to come. Finances, visitation schedules, educational choices. I would save my energy for the truly important matters. As I neared the end of my pregnancy, I realized something profound. Jeff and I were forging a new kind of relationship, one that was neither romantic nor hostile. We were learning to trust, to communicate, and to love our child more than our pride. I had left California frightened and alone. Now I had a strange peace, a sense that we'd find our way. Whether Jeff and I ever became more than co-parents again was irrelevant. The baby would be born into a world where at least he had two parents who were learning to put him first. Story 2. A foster child facing the end of care. My 18th birthday came and went, and I thought I was still secure in my foster home. I had lived with the Peters since I was 7, nearly 11 years. They were the only parents I truly remembered. The people I believed had given me stability and love after a tumultuous early childhood. They always said that legality didn't define family. I believed them. I called them mom and dad, treated their biological son like my own brother, and tried my best to fit in. Though never legally adopted, I felt loved and safe. I never questioned their motives. I never questioned the allowance they received from the government for fostering me. It never mattered to me. I thought they loved me as their son, money or not. When I turned 18, the situation changed. The standard fostering allowance ended, replaced by a reduced staying-put arrangement for young adults transitioning to independence. This arrangement would pay them less, about $1,000 per month, until I turned 21. They always told me I could stay indefinitely, or at least until I finished university. I had a conditional offer to study classics at a local university, planning to become a teacher. I was counting on the Peters' emotional and logistical support through these next few years. Then, out of nowhere, they sat me down and said I had to leave by the end of the week. They were blunt, explaining that fostering was a business for them, and the reduced stipend wasn't enough. They wanted my room for a new foster placement, presumably a more lucrative arrangement. They said it wasn't personal. They still considered me like a son, but now I was no longer bringing in enough money. They told me to pack up and go. I had 4 days. I felt betrayed, hollowed out by shock. After 11 years, I thought we were family. Their biological son, who was 25 and still living at home, was never asked to leave. Just me. I was disposable, it seemed. I had no job, no stable income, and no place to go. I would be starting university soon if I got the grades I needed, but it hadn't even begun yet. They didn't care. They said they needed the room for another foster child. I should be grateful, they implied, for the years they gave me. My world crumbled. I was old enough to know how this looked. The Peters had essentially been using fostering as a source of income. Perhaps they cared for me, but at the end of the day, money spoke louder than love. I contacted my personal advisor, a social worker assigned to help me transition into adulthood. He was sympathetic and shocked. He said I should have been given proper notice and support. He arranged an urgent meeting. Thanks to him, the Peters agreed to extend my stay until the end of August, giving me a bit more time. They even offered me a place in a youth hostel if I felt too uncomfortable staying. But the truth was, I didn't want to be homeless. I had nowhere else to go until I secured stable housing. I decided to remain until proper arrangements were made, even as I felt unbearably awkward and unwanted. The atmosphere at home changed immediately. They barely looked at me or spoke to me. Meals were left at my door instead of us eating together like a family. I felt the absence of their affection as a painful void in every corner of the house. My best friend, whom I turned to for comfort, surprised me by calling me ungrateful. He said I should appreciate that they took care of me for 11 years, and that now they could help another child like me once again. His words stabbed at me. I never wanted to deny help to another foster child, but why must they throw me out with only a few days' warning? Couldn't they have planned a gentler transition, or allowed me time to find a job and a room somewhere? I realized my friend didn't understand the depth of my pain. He'd never been removed from a birth family or worried about homelessness at 18. The one time I truly needed him to listen, he judged me. We argued, and I lost not only my foster family, but also the friend I trusted. I had never felt so alone. In my sorrow, I visited the agency's website and calculated what they had earned fostering me. At least $2,400 a month, probably more. They had made a decent living from fostering. Knowing this did not comfort me. It made me feel cheap, like a commodity. I recalled the times they told me I was family, that legality didn't matter, that I could stay as long as I needed. Were those just empty promises? I tried to remind myself that I'd known love here. They helped raise me from a frightened 7-year-old into a capable 18-year-old. Perhaps that love was real at one time. Now it felt tainted, overshadowed by their decision to prioritize money. At night I struggled to sleep, my mind racing with what-ifs. What if I was never worth loving without a price tag? My personal advisor arranged for social housing. I would get on a list, have help with rent costs, maybe furniture. It wouldn't happen overnight, but at least I wouldn't be on the streets. He assured me that if I felt unsafe or too miserable staying with the Peters until August's end, I could move into a youth hostel. I decided to stay put until a better option appeared. I didn't want to be shuffled around again. Still, the tension in the house was unbearable. My foster mother, no, I guess I should call her Claire now, brought me food upstairs since I no longer felt comfortable eating in the kitchen with them. One day, in a fit of hurt and anger, I called her by her first name instead of Mom. She looked wounded. Some part of me felt guilty, but another part wanted her to understand the pain she'd caused me. I desperately wished she would retract her decision and tell me it was a terrible misunderstanding, but no such words came. As the days passed, I tried to focus on the future. University, a career, building an independent life. The personal advisor's help gave me hope that I could secure housing and financial support as a care leaver. I had some savings. Maybe I could find a job to sustain myself. But the heartbreak of losing my family, of realizing I'd never truly been their child, would take longer to heal. My old friend, who accused me of being ungrateful, only intensified my isolation. Perhaps he saw things too simply. Maybe he believed that money justified everything. He lacked the understanding of what it's like to be unwanted. I didn't want to turn bitter or resentful. I wanted to believe that the Peters had loved me in their own flawed way, that maybe they were embarrassed or conflicted now. When confronted quietly by their adult son, who found out how I felt by reading something I wrote in desperation, he was shocked. He asked why I hadn't told him. I thought he knew. Turns out, he'd been lied to as well. They told him I requested to move out. He confronted them. Still, no apology or change of plans surfaced. If they felt shame or guilt, they didn't voice it. I realized that the time had come to accept reality. I was not powerless. I had access to a personal advisor, potential social housing, and the means to eventually stand on my own 2 feet. I didn't need to beg them for love they weren't willing to give. I could let go and move forward. The best revenge against heartbreak and betrayal is to build a life worth living. I considered no contact after I moved. Some might think it ungrateful. But why should I pretend everything is fine? Why should I perpetuate the illusion that our relationship was never conditional? Maybe I would send them a message one day, explaining how I felt as a 7-year-old boy stepping into their house, terrified and hopeful. How over the years I grew to love them, think of them as Mom and Dad. How painful it was to learn that fostering was, in their eyes, a business transaction. How it hurt to be replaced so easily, for someone younger and more profitable. But maybe I wouldn't send that message at all. Maybe I would just leave it unsaid, start my new life, and let them watch from a distance if they cared enough to do so. I had a future waiting. University, a career, independence. I would prove to myself that I could succeed without their approval or support. In the end, I found a strange calm amidst the chaos. Being abandoned at 18 is terrifying, but it also stripped away illusions. I knew who truly cared. I knew my own strength. I would navigate the adult world on my own terms. For that, I needed no one's permission. The Peters might take in another child, and I hope they treat that child well. But I would go forward, free of their conditions, building a life where love and trust would not be bought or sold.